Welcome back to Africa Science Focus, the weekly science and development show from SciDevNet. I am Ogechi Ekeanyao. Did you know that just 1% of the routine vaccines needed in Africa are produced on the continent? Africa is still dependent on imported vaccines and faces various barriers to becoming vaccine producers. This dependence makes it difficult to respond to health crises, as we saw with COVID-19, where there was a vaccine supply problem. To understand Africa's vaccines needs and challenges, our reporter Michael Kaluki spoke to Dr. Ebere Okereke, Senior Technical Advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and Honorary Senior Public Health Advisor for the African Centre for Disease Control.
Does the African continent have capacity to produce vaccines? It has to build that capacity. It has some capacity, but not enough to meet our needs and to provide the health security that we aspire towards. So as of last year, Africa had the capacity to produce 1% of the vaccines that it needed routinely. I'm not talking about pandemic response here. And the ambition articulated through the Partnerships for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing is to move that capacity from 1% to 40% to 60% of our vaccine needs by 2040. Now, that's an ambitious challenge, but not insurmountable. And some progress has been made with increasing capacity, firstly to produce a COVID vaccine to respond to the current pandemic, but also to move towards a situation where we are more reliant on our own manufacturers for the vaccines that we'll need in the long term. So do we have the capacity now? Not entirely. Can we get the capacity? Absolutely, yes, we can. And it's not just about vaccines. The same challenges exist for the manufacturing of other therapeutics and of diagnostics. We are too reliant on a global system that doesn't actually put us first for supply of most of the technology we need for our health system. So the work that is being developed now will not only solve the problem of the current pandemic, but will set the foundation for us to have more resilience in our system going forward.
Apart from being reliant on the global system, what other challenges does the continent face in regards to developing capacity for diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine production?
Okay, so we'll start with the most obvious, and that is actually funding. Regretfully, there's very little public sector investment in research in life sciences on the continent. And we're only now beginning to see emergence of public-private partnerships investing in research and development. That is the foundation for all we need for this health system supplies. We need the R&D on the continent that will inform the development of the vaccines, the therapeutics, and the diagnostics. So that is the big challenge. And R&D is not an overnight thing. It's long-term investment in the institutions, the people, the talent, the expertise that work in that R&D to ask the right questions to address the priorities on the continent. I would say that in terms of investment need and work efforts that's needed, investment in developing the research and development aspect of manufacturing health products is the number one biggest challenge. But closely linked to that is the challenge of investment. We don't invest in our health system. Too often, our governments see health as a drain on resources rather than an essential investment in our development and economic growth. The pandemic has shown very clearly that if you do not invest in health, development will stall, economic growth will stall, education will stagnate. So we need to find the finances. Then the other challenge, of course, besides investment and R&D, is actually engaging with the industry itself. The pharmaceutical industry is predominantly located in the global north, in a small number of countries. In order to address the current capacity challenges we have in the continent, we have got to engage with that industry.
This December, the second International Conference on Public Health in Africa will take place in Rwanda. One of the main topics of discussion will be increasing local African production of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. We spoke to Professor Claude Muvunyi, Director General for Rwanda Biomedical Centre, about the importance of this conference and the steps Rwanda is taking to increase its vaccine production capacity.
This second international conference on public health in Africa is actually the second one. It's going to be an in-person conference that will provide a unique platform for African researchers, policymakers, and also stakeholders to come together and share perspectives and research findings in public health while ensuring in a new era of strengthened scientific collaboration and innovation across the continent. So building on this CPHIA 2021 that occurred virtually last year, this year's conference will also serve as a catalyst to build more resilient health systems that allow African countries to better prepare for and also manage emerging health threats while also addressing long-standing infectious disease.
Now, Professor, just over a year ago, the International Finance Corporation and the Rwanda Development Board signed a collaboration agreement to develop vaccine manufacturing capacity in Rwanda and contribute to expanding vaccine production in Africa. Could you tell me a bit more about this plan and its goals?
So the government of Rwanda partnered with the International Finance Corporation, as well as also various other organizations, to build the key enablers for the development of an industry to produce vaccines and also other pharmaceutical products. We are working with other partners in a number of different areas, such as building the required capability at the Rwanda Food and Drug Authority to properly regulate this industry, expanding also the academic offering in biotechnology at local education institutions, as well as also setting up new education institutions to address the short-term skill gaps for vaccine manufacturing, and also enhancing further the institutions that are led the Rwanda Biomedical Centre. So I believe that the European company, that BioNTech, which plan to establish a modular messenger RNA vaccine manufacturing plant in Kigali, in Rwanda. So this plant plans to produce up to 50 million doses of BioNTech messenger RNA vaccines, with plans to manufacture other vaccines in BioNTech's pipeline to treat infectious diseases that are endemic to the continent, such as malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV, as well as also cancer treatments. The investment of BioNTech in Rwanda showcases very well the ambition of the country in this industry.
The Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing, in conjunction with the African Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, is pushing to increase Africa's capacity to manufacture vaccines. This is important for both public health and industry development. But getting a new industry off the ground is challenging. We're back to Dr. Ebere Okereke to tell us about what can be done to make an emerging African vaccine manufacturing system successful.
For us to have a vaccine manufacturing ecosystem and industry on the continent, we do not need every country to manufacture. What we need is a diversity of manufacturing across the continent that meets the needs of the continent. So it doesn't mean that every country has to have its own vaccine manufacturer. And in fact, some countries may be better placed to actually manufacture what we call the adjacencies, the things that the industry may need to support it. So simple things like, the containers for vaccines, the syringes and needles that we need. You may recall that during when there was the very hard push for vaccine to deliver the COVID vaccine, there were some countries and some regions ran out of syringes for routine immunization because they were all being used. So there is a need for manufacturing the adjacencies to the vaccine manufacturing, not just the vaccines themselves. Also, we have a population across the continent of 1.5 billion and growing. But there are very few countries who can make it will make economic sense to say we're manufacturing vaccines purely for our own country. It will not make sense economically because the investment will not be worth the size of the market. So what we're aiming for isn't 55 countries manufacturing vaccines, but perhaps closer to a smaller number, much smaller number, and I wouldn't care to sort of suggest a number here, that will manufacture for the continent. So having said that, those that are the front runners, so to speak, in manufacturing, what did they have in place? So first of all, there were either countries that already had some pre-existing vaccine manufacturing capacity, so like South Africa and Senegal, for example, or they already had a pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity, not just for vaccines, but for other medical products existing in the continent. That gives you an advantage in that you already understand the needs and you already have the networks and opportunities. A key thing, I would say, a key enabler is political support, and not just support in terms of principles. We support and endorse there being a manufacturer in our country, but supporting that by creating an enabling trade environment for partnership with the international players, with investment, actually either in building the physical architecture itself or in training the workforce or funding the training of the workforce. That sort of political commitment is really key. Having access to research and development institutions or partnering already with research and development institutions and academic institutions developing the workforce. Those are the sort of, and again, these are all the things that the Partnership for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing outlines as the enabling environment. One of the most important steps is having a national regulatory authority that has the qualifications, the people to be able to support the development of those industries. So those are the sort of factors that have enabled them to make progress quickly. So what other countries can do is then look at, okay, where is our regulatory authority? How do we support our national regulatory authority to get to the required WHO standard to be able to license and support any manufacturing system that emerges? Where is our pharmaceutical industry that exists already? Do we already have manufacturers that are producing sterile products? Can they be leveraged into producing vaccines or other therapeutics and diagnostics? Do we have the workforce? Can we train the workforce? Those are sort of the key questions that you need to. What are our trade policies that allow, say, do we have enabling tax laws that allow you to import the reagents and the basic products required for manufacturing without an undue tax that will therefore support this industry coming to us? Those are the sort of questions that we would expect countries, manufacturers in those countries, the governments in those countries, the investment ecosystem in that country to ask themselves as they begin to grapple with the opportunity. And I stress this is really an opportunity to invest in an emerging vaccine manufacturing system. Because we need to remember that we're not just investing for vaccines of today. The new technology, such as mRNA technology, suggests that there's opportunity to start to think about a lot more diseases that we can manufacture, not just vaccines, but therapeutics for, biologics, for example, for treating cancers, for treating other immune modulated diseases. We can start to look at diagnostics. It's the same foundation that informs all these things. Funding, political support, enabling trade industry, research and development, manpower. Those are critical.
That's all from us at Africa Science Focus today. If you want to find out more, head to the SciDevNet website. That's www.scidev.net. Today's show was produced by Alice Hurst with editing by Ogechi Ekeanyao and reporting by Michael Kaluki. I'm Ogechi Ekeanyao. Until next time, goodbye. Africa Science Focus is produced by SciDevNet and distributed in association with your local radio station. We also have our new Africa Science Focus podcast newsletters. Do subscribe.